over, Kate Beckinsale. There's a new raven-haired goth hero in town. You're watching Beyond the Trailer's review of Dracula Untold.
What is it you are seeking?
I want the power to destroy my enemies and save my family.
There's no turning back.
Drink Dracula.
Welcome to your life.
What's happening to you?
I'm the thing men fear, not a ghost. Something else.
Celine, Alice, Hansel, and Gretel. These characters have carved out a nice little niche for themselves in Hollywood. Goth mini blockbusters that are real fan pleasers. But they're harder to pull off than they look. Vin Diesel's Riddick has struggled. Pompeii was buried alive at the box office. And I, Frankenstein, made the immortal monster seem pretty darn mortal. But speaking of Frankenstein, characters like that are in the public domain, allowing Lionsgate to make the Aaron Eckhart film, while Universal is the famed home of the monster movie in Hollywood. Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, the Wolfman, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon were Universal stars back in the 1930s, save the Creature, who wouldn't debut until 1954. The films made Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, and Lon Chaney Jr. household names. And now, as Universal watches comic book cinematic universes being built all around them, they're looking to resurrect their monsters brand. Genius or the work of a mad doctor? Either way, that genius or mad doctor will be Alex Kurtzman of Star Trek and Amazing Spider-Man fame, who Universal has hired to oversee this new cinematic universe and to direct a new The Mummy film. In 2016, that's supposed to be the premiere of these rebooted monsters. Yet as producer Alyssa Phillips and director Gary Shore make the rounds to promote Dracula Untold, they're saying this movie might be a soft debut for the brand as well, with star Luke Evans hopefully making a cameo in the new The Mummy, all of those fabulously successful Marvel crossovers. But while Universal must like what they see with Dracula Untold, will audiences accept this new origin story? Instead of the classic Bram Stoker version, this film weaves in actual historical events, as gritty realism is quite in fashion these days. Luke Evans plays real-life Vlad the Impaler, a hero to his own people in Eastern Europe for keeping them safe, even though the vicious ways he went about doing that became infamous, and he was nicknamed Dracula. And in real life, Vlad really did fight Mehmed the Conqueror, here played by Dominic Cooper. Game of Thrones' Charles Dance also plays an infamous real-life historical figure, but I won't ruin the surprise. The movie even ties in some Eastern European folklore, the witch Baba Yaga. Strong world building has always been what's helped these goth mini blockbusters survive. But is this new Dracula a good fit with Universal's new monster reboot, or a literal Eastern European Batman?
So there's this famous Ronald Reagan saying, which I think is totally applicable to Dracula Untold. And what Reagan used to say is that when you find yourself presented with a giant pile of horse poop, there's bound to be a pony buried in there somewhere. And so while Dracula Untold is definitely a giant pile of horse poop, there are actually several ponies to be found inside. And the first pony is Luke Evans, who does a very good job here. Not just with his action sequences, but he imbues his Dracula with both strength and warmth. And I would love to see him continue in the role. That's how good he is. I think he makes for a great Dracula. I just hope that going forward he gets better support from pretty much everyone else involved in the movie, with the exception of the visual effects team, which are our second pony. But before we discuss the visual effects in the film, I think it's only fair to address something we've discussed a couple of times here now and Beyond the Trailer, and that's Luke Evans' sexuality. Now, long story short, if you want the whole story, you can head over to my Talent Watch episode on Luke Evans. I'll put a link at the end of this video. But when he started out in his career, he was brazenly out of the closet. But as his career progressed and he went to Hollywood, Luke Evans not only went into the closet, but went deep inside of the closet. So the question becomes twofold. Does an actor need to be in the closet to succeed in Hollywood? And if they're out of the closet, will mainstream audiences accept them as a heterosexual leading man in an action film like this? Now, I'm not sure how much of the general public is aware of Luke Evans' sexuality because he did go back into the closet, but Dracula Untold is performing pretty well this weekend, so I'm not sure if that's a good thing, for openly homosexual actors in Hollywood, or a bad thing. But as for Luke Evans himself and his performance here, he's very good, very convincing. I'm aware of his sexuality, and he made me forget it. He made me only see the character he was playing on screen. And I'm sure some of you right now are typing, of course, Grace, you shouldn't mix an actor's personal life with their professional life. But if you head over to that Talent Watch episode, I point out a couple of actors, openly homosexual actors, or actors with rumors surrounding them that have had problems because of that and have found their choice of roles limited. So again, maybe this is a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how aware the public is of Luke Evans' sexuality. So it's good or bad, but we'll see. But he's very good in the role and very convincing in that regard. So the second pony, the visual effects. Excellent, excellent visual effects. I wish there were more of them, and I never got tired of that giant cloud of bats. And I also like the way the vampires were realized here in general. Usually we have bedroom vampires. They're all sexy, they're just flying into the window, and then there's a lot of like bodice ripping. But here, these were battle vampires, and I thought they came across as very powerful, and I love the different elements they added to the mythology. I don't want to give anything away because, again, this is one of the few good points of the film, but I really liked this version of vampires, and they had just enough new elements to make it seem fresh. So just like I'd like to see more of Luke Evans as Dracula, I'd like to see more of this kind of vampire. Now, the third pony, there are 4 ponies in total. So the third one is that I like seeing the Middle Ages depicted in a different corner of the globe. Usually, Hollywood always talks about Western Europe during their Middle Ages, coverage. But here we saw Eastern Europe and also the Middle East with Turkey, and I thought that was really refreshing. Although, on a side note, I thought making the Middle Eastern characters such clear-cut, mustache-twirling villains was a little cliche and I think not particularly helpful with our current global situation. I think vilifying entire groups of people with no redemption or characters to offset the evil ones is somewhat verges on propaganda, and I think Hollywood needs to be a little bit more responsible with that. So the fourth pony is the ending. I liked where the movie ended up. Again, I don't want to give anything away, but I thought it was interesting that basically the movie just ended up being one way too long prologue. And at the end, it just basically was Underworld. It was kind of became an Underworld ripoff, where Luke Evans, of course, was Celine, a male version of Celine, complete with the same hairstyle and taste in clothing. And then you even had like a Bill Nye foil, if you recall, was in, I think, the first 2 Underworlds. So that, again, maybe he might have been in some of the other ones as well. Bill Nye gets a lot of work in this field. He was also on I, Frankenstein. But anyway, it just became Underworld light, but I would be down for that, and I wish that the movie had started where it ended. So what were the problems? If there's 4 ponies, where's all the horse poop? Well, let me tell you. I think that, as I said again, the story was just basically too long of a prologue. And I think also the movie decided to focus quite heavily on Dracula's romance with his wife. And I gotta tell you, nobody wants to see a settled down Dracula. I think there are just some characters that shouldn't settle down. James Bond, Indiana Jones, Dracula. So seeing him play house here, I think took a big part of what makes Dracula such a famous character out of the equation, and it was not helpful. So I didn't like all the focus on the romance. I could care less about his relationship with his wife. That's not why anybody goes to a Dracula movie, and they really relied on that heavily. And I think the reason they relied on it heavily was because they had a limited special effects budget. And so usually a very well-crafted film can hide that and not make you be aware that they're kind of hitting their head against the ceiling, being like, if only we could incorporate visual effects here, but we can't afford it. The audience shouldn't be aware of your restrictions as filmmakers. And so because they had limited special effects or visual effects, one of you recently told me there's a difference in the 2 terms. Visual effects are the computer-generated kind. They had to rely more on story, and their story just wasn't that good. So I would say that, again, a couple of ponies in play here. I think I'd be interested in a sequel, but as for this version of Dracula Untold, you can watch it as a genre fan. Again, I think you'll have some stuff that you take away that you like, but you'd probably be better served overall just watching or streaming an Underworld marathon. All right, so that's my review of Dracula Untold. If you've seen the film, I hope you'll leave your own thoughts down below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and you can check out some more episodes right now.